Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition. And due to vacation, we'll be releasing one episode this week and our practice edition next week. And then we'll be back on the regular schedule the following week. And you want to hit me with that quote?
Yup. This is from Designing the Future, and it is compatibility before completion.
Yeah.
Which is, the whole book is about lean R&D, and really R&D applies to any problem-solving activities, and the idea is to slowly converge, like simultaneous convergence on a solution, and any rework is waste. And so this is sort of that concept of convergence before completion. Oftentimes people sort of rush to an end state that they have in their head without making sure it works.
Yeah, this hits
I
home.
guess.
I made some new tooling over the last few weeks, kind of here or there. I was feeling crunched for time and pressure to get it done so we could start making parts that make money again.
Right.
Yeah, and just made a little oversight. Well, two oversights actually that required rework. Luckily we were able to do them in situ, in place, but it was still one of those things where like very interruptive. Like quorum was like putting a vise on, and it's like put the vise on the top, everything looks good, then he tries to put the bolt in, doesn't go, gotta open up the hole, open up the counterbore because I forgot to check a thread size.
Interesting. I'm trying to think how you check compatibility in that case before completion. Like that's sort of where 3D printing comes in, but realistically 3D printing that whole trunnion would be not realistic. You could, I guess, just do a piece that is the...
I mean, it was in the 3D model. I just forgot to look. And it was on the print. I just forgot. I was just rushing.
Oh, no. But this idea of compatibility before completion, how do you check for compatibility? Is that just a step in the process where you go and recheck all of your...
Probably, yeah.
Because there's nothing quite like... I mean, Dylan from Protium and Within Tolerance posted a story of a 3D printed tool setter. Yeah. And that was really just for this, right? It's like, before we bother, does this work? Yeah. And there's nothing quite like seeing it in a funny way. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think in situations where that's relevant and possible, yes. I think in other situations you probably just have to be like have a cross your T's and dot your I's step, sort of.
Yeah.
Which these are, but the other issue is I mirrored a hole pattern that was not symmetrical for pneumatic connections. Mm-hmm. And that was checkable in the 3D model. Like if I'd actually bothered to put the vise fully in place. Interesting. And, made things transparent in the model, I could see that the holes were reversed, but I was just working from the drawing.
So it's interesting. I feel like this is reminding me of this issue we're having. It's not really an issue. I just noticed it in myself where when things are going well, you sort of start to speed up instead of starting to slow down. Mm-hmm. So like on our mill, we've made these SOPs and I find myself tempted to skip them because it's like, wow, this whole process goes so smoothly. It's like, until you make a mistake. Yeah. Which is why you're doing a point and call every time you do a setup. So in a similar way. Yeah. Yeah, maybe there's a step. It's kind of like it's sort of in-station, like lean concept, in-station quality. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like before you pass the work to the next step, you make sure it's all good. Yeah. I don't know. Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. I think also it's like it's easier to justify when you're going to be handing parts off to a customer and you won't get paid. I think oftentimes when you're doing stuff for yourself, you're like, whatever, we'll fix it. Like we just need to get this done and make it work. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but I think that's often the mentality.
Yeah, I could see that. Something I've been thinking about a bit, it's a little thought just to throw out there. We've talked a lot about internal engineering versus external engineering, like of solutions and all sorts of, tools and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of I started looking at how much money we're spending every month on stuff, shelving, whatever it is. There's tons of stuff every single month. And it occurs to me that a good portion, if you took that money and cut it in half and diverted it to paying internal people, it would sort of allow you to have, that wouldn't fully cover an employee, but it would cover quite a bit of an employee, which gives you a lot of flex labor. So it occurred to me, something we've covered in the past is sort of as a small business, it's hard to get that flex labor. And I was just kind of thinking, I think part of that might be, I wonder if that's part of why Toyota does so many huge projects internally, is it keeps skills in-house, right? So you're teaching people new skills, and you're keeping the money in-house. So if you have a huge influx of work, you can pull them off those projects. I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about. I don't really have a conclusion.
No, I think it's a good concept. I think the training side of it is where it having the bandwidth to actually give everybody all the various skills they need to achieve the different the different flex labor positions that need to be done in one way or another.
I think it was in the Toyota Way, maybe, talking about the filing cabinet. Who makes those filing cabinets? I'm not gonna remember that. A big lean success story in the U.S. And they ran a training class that was a 30-day, all day, every day. Yeah. And they found, it's very expensive to do that type of training. Yeah. And they found that two of the students paid for the rest of the class, covered the cost of the class. Yeah. Within, I forget, 2 months or 3 months or something. Yeah.
In there,
just in improving the operations of the business. Yeah. Which is pretty amazing. Yeah. It's still hard to find that bandwidth to, I can't teach a 30-day intensive class.
I think it's less about money or capital expenditure at our scale and more just about the actual time to continue operations as well as train somebody up to do a new skill. But
absolutely.
But maybe that's all just perception too, because every time I take a moment to teach somebody something, it's immediately better.
Yeah. I had a fun thing yesterday. Sam asked me to show him how to, I forget, something with the coolant.
Like refractometer or something, checking.
Yeah, checking and filling the back. Yeah. There was a QR code on the back of the machine that says coolant training videos. I was like, watch that.
Nice.
And I was like, if there's anything missing, tell me and we can update the video. Yeah. Because especially as we're looking at growing the team, I feel like all those videos really start to pay off. And we definitely saw that with Sam, just having all these well-documented processes, color-coded things. It just made him, the time from arriving with really zero manufacturing, skills, experience, to adding value was pretty short.
How are you finding the updating videos process to be? I've been really hesitant to do videos because I'm not skilled at making them. And so I find that even if I need to redo it, I'm so focused on just trying to make a video that I might forget what the changes I need to make are. Whereas text plus photos, I feel is very easy to compare as you go or just add the specific piece that you need.
Yeah. So I think for me, if you show an employee how to do something, if they are holding a video camera, that counts as a video. And if there's notes that need to be added, you could add them to the description or something. I don't think it's the I'm not trying to make good videos. I'm trying to, if they watch the video and then say, hey, I have 2 other questions and that's 3 minutes, great. Instead of a 10-minute, whole process. So I think it's just a lot faster than making a text and image document. And a lot richer sort of in terms of I've found watching YouTube videos to learn things. You just see a lot of weird things that you don't even think to mention, where they're putting their hands. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So that's how I've been doing it mostly. Like when I train Sam on something, I'll have him hold a video camera, do the thing, and then we just add a QR, like make a QR code and post it.
Interesting. That's a cool.
And that's basically it.
Way to think about doing it together. I'd never really thought of that. That makes a lot of sense.
And then they can also ask questions in the video. I think the other thing is to keep them really short. So rather than making a video about like how to run a CNC mill, it would be more like how to update work coordinate system, how to, because that way, if there's one that's really bad, you just delete it, or one that needs updating, you can reshoot it and add it to playlists.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still really at the beginning, but it was fun to see it being useful.
Yeah. Cool. You want to jump in?
Things from the week. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Bottleneck breakthrough. Is this kind of what we talked about the other day?
It is. So this is basically all of my notes are on this. Well, no, there's sort of two topics, but we had a big bottleneck breakthrough. 10
times fast.
Yeah. And actually successfully, finally yesterday, doubled our throughput in one day. Like we did basically everything. We didn't do all of the assembly of those buckles, but rather than doing 60, we did 120.
Oh, wow. That's a big double.
Yeah. So that was cool. And that includes like machining and everything, painting and everything. What I finally realized, which I've read before and I've seen before and I've even talked about before, but somehow it like really clicked. Like information is inventory. And so when you're looking for bottlenecks, you often are looking for large inventories ahead of the bottleneck. And we have a production board in our shop, which is often booked out like a week of buckles to paint. And then somehow in my head, it wasn't like, oh, our paint department is the bottleneck. But in seeing that, finally, I was like, oh, there it is. That's the bottleneck. Now, it's that, and it's also inventory in the form of emails in my inbox, which I think I've mentioned before. And the like commonality orders between the two, wholesale conversations, stuff like that. Press, like things that are sort of longish lead times that are... And the commonality there, like Eliyahu Goldratt talks about, sometimes if you see two bottlenecks or multiple bottlenecks, you look for a common asset that is working across multiples. So yeah, I'm the only one who does paint, and I'm also the one in charge of my inbox. So that's pretty straightforward. Yeah. And so in a funny way, like I feel like I've said all those things on this podcast before. Yeah. But I guess in a new way, I'm like very clear on the fact that the throughput to the company is throttled by me. And so now I'm like, okay, which functions am I doing that I can just fully hand off? Yeah, I've been having the exact same realization for the last 2 months. Yeah, like I am the bottleneck, which is super common. Yeah. So that's kind of it. So the interesting thing there is like information is inventory, I think. Did you restructure your Kanban flow at all like we talked about, or you just trying to paint more? So now we can double our painting. Right, you added more racks. I made double the racks because before we were having this issue where for all the activities to do a double batch of paint to line up, because we only had one set of racks, everything had to be done serially. And it's just a lot of hours, and we only have 8 in the day. And if anything went wrong, it just wouldn't happen. So previously we've sort of cheated by like pushing some of the stuff to the day before, so it's waiting there ready, which is cheating is, allowed in this case, right? That could become standard, but it was really a struggle to make it happen. And so adding a second set of racks meant that we could push the parts that were going to go in next all the way like ready to go. Yeah. Instead of sort of starting that process when the oven finished. Now the oven is a big bottleneck in the paint department, because it runs for 2 hours, and so you kind of have to wait to paint more till those are done. Yep. Yeah. Did you mess with we had that discussion about multiple, instead of treating the Kanban flow as like a sequential step, as like a multiple flows to one kind of node. Did you mess with that at all? I haven't really. So the concept is basically so our mill is an expensive piece of equipment in the shop. So it's hard to get a second. And so it's really good to keep it running. And what I was noticing is that we would idle the machine even though we had a huge amount of production scheduled on the board for the paint department. But because we were running a pull system with 3 loops of Kanban, we would only produce parts once the paint department pulled parts. But you're looking at the board and it's like, okay, so tomorrow is going to be a huge thrash to get all the parts machined, but the Kanbans aren't here yet. So I had called you asking about how to alleviate that. You had a couple interesting ideas of sort of triggering both at the same time. But I think all of that is addressing the fact that that paint is a bottleneck. I think I still need to solve this problem because this is sort of the idea of, what is it, Heijunka? Which is like production leveling is key because like if our mill isn't keeping up on some days but is idle other days, it's easy to look at that and go like, okay, can we move some of the busy day to the not busy day? And so I'm not sure how I'm going to solve that with Kanban. I'm a little hesitant to do something that's like not typically done because there's probably a reason. At the same time, maybe it's worth just trying it to find out what that reason is. Yeah, it is a little atypical for sure. Yeah, and it's sort of like that single source of truth thing kind of goes out the window when you fork a Kanban in a weird way, maybe. I guess the way I was imagining it was more like, if you imagine the paint department as like the beginning of an assembly line. Yeah. And a bunch of things need to arrive to that point in the assembly line. It could be like, okay, paint needs to arrive here and the parts need to arrive here and the assembly tooling needs to arrive here. That, I guess, in a strict Kanban system, that would still all get triggered from that point in the assembly line. But since your load is not level, like since your orders are not level, and you were talking about trying to balance the load on the mill to be more in time with, it just seemed like a way to be more in time with the paint. It seemed like a way you could balance the production without having such big buffers between the two. Yeah, so the other concept which I was sort of toying around with was having that scheduling board for our paint department and then sort of pulling machined parts onto that same board, like having a shelf under that board. So I could basically pile up all the parts needed for each day. And then we could sort of say we're only going to go out X number of days. I think I understand. I don't know. It's a work in process. I think it's in reading this Job Shop Lean book. I think it's good to remember that a lot of the lean methodology is really oriented towards like a single flow line. Like an assembly line. Yeah. And once you start to break that into like a lot of various processes, it gets a little bit more complex. And obviously an assembly line is still pulling from multiple processes. Yeah. But they all flow into this single thing. And I think it's good to kind of try and step out of that every once in a while and imagine treating sort of some of the aspects as their own units and what does that start to look like? Yeah. And even though your stuff all ends up together at the end as a finished product, I wonder if there could be some value. Yeah. Could be some value in treating them as individual cells instead of as a theoretical continuous flow line. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. I'm like working toward one, but there's also the realities of today to be considered. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you had some stuff from your from this lean book. Yeah, so I've just been very slow. It's been a challenging week, honestly. But and it is called Job Shop Lean. Job Shop Lean. Yeah, so I made a couple notes here. One was an interesting, I think this was pulled from Goldratt,
was the idea of cash flow velocity. And
Okay.
I mean, Goldrat, I've never heard Goldrat say that, but
Yeah.
He's pulling from like order flow time, inventory dollar days, which is a Goldrat concept,
Yeah.
and dollars shipped per day. And if you kind of look at all of those in conjunction, you get this like what he's calling cash flow velocity of like how quick does the cash come into your business and then have to go back out, or how much do you keep in there?
Okay.
How much is stuff sort of stagnating is sort of the concept I'm pulling out of that.
And high is good or bad?
I think high would be good if it's like coming in quickly.
Okay.
And I don't know.
I could see that.
It wasn't very well like expounded upon.
Okay.
But it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So the other one, and we've sort of like talked about this a little bit, was just time to complete an order.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a couple stats in here that were kind of like, whoa. So I'm just going to quote it directly. When the life of the average workpiece in a batch type metal cutting production shop is analyzed, only about 5% of its time is actually spent on machine tools. And of that 5%, only about 30% is actually spent as productive time removing metal. Or, if you add those together, 1.5% of the overall time spent in the shop. And clearly a lot of people have been working on this for like decades or centuries, and we're still not that much better at it. But
do you think people have been? Because my feeling is that there's a lack of clarity in a lot of production, which is like this is why walking around the shop going like value add, non-value add, non-value add, non-value add, value add is useful, right? Because most people lose focus of like the only thing customers are paying for or want to be paying for
right
is when metal is coming off of your part.
Well, I think people lose focus, but I think they lose focus because...
Oh, no. Here, you keep going. I'll go turn that off.
I think people lose focus because the like challenges that we face are real. So, like, I guess what I'm saying is like people have been trying to make more money for a long time.
Yes.
And be more productive.
Right.
And there's very real challenges to increasing that number. Not to say it's not doable, but on the other hand, it's very motivating to think, well, if I push that 1.5% to 3%,
yeah,
I think we could double our throughput potentially.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think the focus should not be on the 1.5%, but on the 98.5%.
No, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It's like
if I can cut that down, and there's so much room.
There's
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. It was kind of like, I was just like sitting there at the picnic table with my kid and was like, oh, out loud.
So similarly, in one of Shigeo Shingo's books, I'm forgetting which one, he talks about basically decreasing lead times by 500% through 3 activities. Mm-hmm. It's like batch, reducing your batch size by 10x or an order of magnitude. So it's batch delays, it's process delays, which is basically lack of synchronization. So like something completes before the next process is ready for it. And I'm forgetting the last one off the top of my head. But I guess those numbers kind of add up, right?
Yeah, they do.
They line up.
Which we really need to do a SMED episode soon. And get more in depth, because I think for many of us, that is one of the lowest hanging fruits in pushing that number and moving the needle in any way whatsoever.
So this is also interesting because it really shows you why an emphasis on cycle time is kind of silly, right? It's like, that's 5%, right? Even complete cycle time with wasted air cuts and air moves. And
I mean, yes.
It is a bottleneck.
It is a bottleneck, and there's so much room in other aspects of the process to cut out. So like, of that 5%, it's kind of like 30% is in cut, and then the rest is positioning, loading, gauging, idle, etc.
Idle, and this is from the point of view of the parts? Like the part is waiting or the machine is idle?
Machine is idle. Maybe it's the part.
Okay.
It's just a graph, so they didn't do a great job of describing. But, and then the part time in shop moving and waiting is 95% of the total.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, it tracks, like, especially if you view something as a single part. Like in our shop, we're trying to work on kind of like a total 3 to 4 week turnaround. Usually the part is in our shop, like from raw material arrival to delivery is 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And of that, an individual piece is probably on a machine anywhere from 5 minutes to a half an hour.
Right.
And part of that is the nature of us doing batch work because that's what our customers order.
It's so interesting to me that that's still standard. Like so much of the advantage of U.S. manufacturing is the reduced lead times, but still everyone is ordering in batches. Yeah. Like it makes sense. Yeah. Like it is the right answer to the current conditions how everyone is running their companies. Mm-hmm. This is why more people should listen to this podcast. No, no, but really, I mean, I was just talking to someone the other day about the issues with inventory and sitting on, like, you have to predict way ahead of time what you think you're going to sell. Yeah. And so people say, oh, we can offshore it. Which is totally valid. I mean, tons of people are doing it, and like a lot of industries, you have to do it. Yeah. Because the skills really don't exist here anymore.
Or the costs are too high. One of the two.
Yeah, but like cut and sew, I'm thinking in particular, is like absolutely brutal in the U.S. Partly because like people think U.S. manufacturing quality, you can't get the quality here. Yeah. Because
skills don't exist anymore.
Anyway, so point is, a huge contributor to all the costs is like the carrying costs of the inventory. Yeah. And so we are not maximizing the advantages of manufacturing in the U.S. when we're batching.
I think it's true. I think the main constraints really have to do with are based in relationships and in like logistics, like classic logistics of like moving things from place to place. Yeah. If those barriers were lower, I want to believe that more and also not just classic logistics, but also like administrative overhead in that most of these companies are not set up to do a lot of small orders and don't have the manpower to do a lot of tiny orders.
Totally. I mean, even just looking at between you and I, like I order my stock from you and I just feel like that whole process is pretty inefficient and requires each of us to do like a couple emails or a couple sort of touch points every single time. And so saying, hey, why don't we double the number of times like
we do that? Yeah.
that we do that is sort of not very appetizing probably to me or to you.
Well, I think that's where...
And so it sort of take, a very close working relationship to say, hey, how can we improve this interaction and cut the labor out of it?
Everybody has to be on board with some sort of like automatically triggered ordering system like Kanban or something in that vein and be comfortable with it and familiar with it. And it comes to as we're speaking, I think the genuine barrier is the relationship side, and that people are not willing on both sides, that vendor and client. Yeah. People are not willing to be that entwined for the most part.
Right. And the problem is that I see we manufactured like a ton of face shields during the pandemic. We were talking to various people. One person I talked to does a lot of manufacturing in Asia, and he was like, no, here's the problem. Because I was saying like, hey, do you think we could do it here at long term at a competitive cost? And he was like, absolutely not, because what you don't realize is they, are making film, punching out the film, and then they're going to cut a hole in the floor to send the scrap down one floor to their neighbor below, who processes the plastic, their scrap, right back into raw material to send back upstairs to turn back into film.
In Asia or here?
Yeah, he was like, that's what you're competing with, partly. Like, yes, there's a labor element, but also the willingness the willingness and the density of manufacturing. It's like if you go to Shenzhen to manufacture electronics and you need a component, it's like, oh yeah, just walk down the block and they manufacture those.
Right. It's like a tightly knit web.
Yeah. And so there's huge efficiencies there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the issue here is like, yes, no one wants to build those relationships or to become so entwined, but there's huge efficiency gains to be had.
There are. Yeah.
For it. Anyway.
And the infrastructure. Like the fact that it's like challenging in many places even to like find a viable location where you could be next to a partner.
Right.
And that's a big hurdle. Whereas that's often, in Shenzhen, like that's encouraged and there's a lot of money and like government administration that like smooths that path, makes it easier.
Yeah, I'm not really sure
how it
came about, but yeah.
One other little tidbit from the book. So we've talked quite a bit about like employee satisfaction, employee retention, employee engagement. A lot of people have asked questions to the podcast about like, how do you do this? And so there was another cool little graph in here that I found very intriguing. That was basically, I think they basically just did polling. And I think of what they did polling of what creates job satisfaction, or as they put it, extreme satisfaction.
Okay.
Or extreme dissatisfaction. And I think we often believe that, like pay, like workplace cleanliness and like organization are really key. Based on this graph, it's not at all the case, which was really intriguing. So the way they structured this is they pulled around 2,000 unique events that caused extreme satisfaction or dissatisfaction.
Okay.
And then they distributed them based on percentage. So like percentage of events that created satisfaction that were in a certain category.
Okay.
So I'm just going to read them off. The winner here on satisfaction was achievement, like far and away.
Interesting. So like an employee achieving something.
Having a some sort of success or growth or something. Second was recognition. These also had the potential for being a dissatisfaction, I think.
Okay. Right. Non-recognition or non-achievement.
Yeah. But they didn't weigh as heavily in that direction. The work itself was third. Responsibilities was fourth. Advancement was fifth. Growth was sixth. These are all weighted in the positive.
Okay.
Then these are all now weighted in the negative. Company policy and an administration has almost no ability to move the needle in a positive direction, but can move the needle extremely heavily in a negative direction. So like 35%, this was the far and away winner on the negative side.
Okay.
35% of the extreme dissatisfaction reports were due to company policy and administration.
Fascinating.
Only 5% of the satisfaction side were due to company policy and administration. Next on the negative was supervision. Next on the negative was relationship with supervisor. And then we get to the bottom, and it's all sort of evenly split with a slight weight to the negative. And those are in order: salary, relationship with peers, personal life, relationship with subordinates, status, and security at the very bottom. So I thought this was just really interesting because it's very different than kind of what the common discourse is around what people think matters.
I wonder if this comes down to which levers feel easy, right? It's like, oh, pay. Let me compensate for our crappy
I think it also
bureaucracy.
I think it's also weighted towards like, I think the reality of what it takes to hire somebody is very different than what it takes to retain somebody and keep them interested. So I think a lot of people, when considering a job,
Interesting.
they look at the pay, they look at the hours, they look at the stability, they look at the cleanliness of the location, because that's all you can really look at in that scenario. You can't really compare any of the other aspects of the job unless you
That's
go
really
interview
interesting.
everybody. But then once you're in it, that stuff just is. It just is like a reality, and now you're faced with everything else in the position that you have to deal with on a daily basis. So I think it's, as an employer, it's probably valuable to start thinking about those two things as separate. Like, how
do we attract talent, and then how do we retain talent?
Yeah, and that they can't be the same, and they're really actually quite different.
Yeah.
And I thought, in regards to like continuous improvement, the fact that achievement was like so high and above a winner, really points to that being important, because
that's a great point.
As soon as you become normalized to your work environment, you don't really tend to feel like you're achieving a lot, because we just get used to what we succeed at.
Right. And giving people some time every day to build toward achieving a thing.
Yeah.
And then it being like everyone sees it and goes like, wow, what a great improvement. That gets into like the recognition side of it.
And then the work itself and responsibilities, all those are like
all getting improved.
And they're all entwined in like having agency over your position and improving your position. And
interesting.
Makes a lot of sense.
Wow, it's all coming together. I had a thought on compounding, and we should kind of wrap up. But basically, the difference between continuous improvement and like TPS and sort of theory of constraints again. I think the reason TPS and like lean companies say like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
I think that's because of compounding effects. And so like if you save a little bit of time every day, it's not actually really gonna stack up in a noticeable way until it starts compounding substantially.
Yeah.
So that's one. I listened to a 3-piece podcast on Warren Buffett, who was all about compounding.
Of course.
But he was like, he famously was pretty cheap in his personal life, because he would look at like the cost of a burger and be like, that's $10 now, but in 70 years that $10 would be X. Anyway,
that makes a lot of sense, but that's not how I want to live.
Yes. Same, but with improvements that could be fun.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, I think that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Hope that last little bit was interesting and not just a distraction.
No, super interesting.
Yeah.
And again, we will not be releasing an episode on Friday, but instead we'll be releasing that episode next Wednesday. And till next week.
Talk to you soon.